I just recently ranked the top 10 worst enemies from the Souls games, and now I think it's only fair I rank the top 10 best enemies in Souls games. In terms of ranking, I'll go honorable mentions, the 10th spot, all the way to the 1st spot. Also, I'll be ranking it based off several things like enjoyability, uniqueness, creativity, just how fun the encounters are in general. And before we get into the honorable mentions, let me just suggest the possibility of you guys liking or perhaps even subscribing. Now let's get into the honorable mentions. My first honorable mention is the Chancellor or the Channeler from Dark Souls Remastered. And I low-key think he's underrated because during my playthrough, I didn't really think of him that much, but he's a super unique encounter that you're only going to run into maybe like 4 times throughout the game. He's a very unique character in terms of just, design, his weapon, his armor set. He looks super cool, and also he has the ability to buff his enemies, which I think he's the only enemy to do that in Dark Souls Remastered. And he buffs enemies all around the area, which obviously means you're going to either have to deal with him or just deal with a lot more annoying and harder enemies. And although I do feel like the enemies he buffs in the Undead Parish, like those hollows, are super annoying, I don't think that takes away from the fact that he's super unique, super fun, and I think it's just a great overall addition to Dark Souls. The next honorable mention is going to be the Elder Monkeys from Sekiro. Now, low-key, I was not expecting much when I first ran into these enemies. I thought there were going to be some weak enemies that I'm going to 1 or 2 shot, I'm just going to control the fight and kill them easily. But low-key, these guys make you play on their terms. Like, they are very offensive. Like, you're going to have to play defense and just go with the flow. And these guys obviously have very cool, unique attacks. They're actually a pretty hard fight in general. And lastly, you're fighting a fucking monkey, which just looks super cool. Now, my second to last honorable mention is going to be those red-eyed knights and those blue-eyed knights from Demon Souls. I just think they look super cool, and they're definitely super unique for the area that they're in. I'm pretty sure they have some, pretty crazy lore, like they were, I don't know, some important guy in this area. But nonetheless, it is still pretty cool to fight a little mix-up of actual hard enemies in Demon Souls, because every single enemy in this area is pretty fucking easy. But the main thing I want to focus on are these red knights. They are super, aggravated. They're always going to be on offense. They're going to be attacking you, and you really just want to avoid them because they're going to do crazy amounts of damage. They're going to have crazy amounts of health, and low-key, these guys killed me a lot, and I had to restart the level a lot because of them. But I'm not mad because I think they are pretty cool enemies. And my last honorable mention are going to be Dark Wraiths from Dark Souls Remastered. Now, these guys are pretty cool, and originally I had them in 7th place, but low-key, they're not that crazy or unique. They're just your average pretty badass fight. I mean, they're pretty cool-looking knights. They're relatively decent. I mean, they fit in their area perfectly, and they're a pleasure to fight, but they're nothing absolutely crazy, so that's why I think they deserve the spot. And before we get into the top 10, please let me know in the comments any videos you want to see, any ideas you have, anything like that. Anything I can do better about the video, anything you like about the video, any opinions you have, just comment anything. Anything in this video that sparks a thought in your brain, just comment it. Please comment. And on to the top 10. Now, coming in the number 10th spot is the Knights of Millennia, or the Cleanrot Knights. I'm pretty sure they're the same thing. Now, firstly, I just love that special attack they have with their scythe, where they swing it upwards and those holy things track and follow you. I think that is really cool and really unique just for, if you're running away and just spam healing. Also, I just really fuck with the vibe of this boss. It's only in rotted areas, but its whole premise is not just rotted. It does have one attack, which you should be able to dodge, and if you don't dodge, it probably will rot you, but you're not likely to get that attack, and if you are, you can most likely dodge it. Also, just love the armor set. The armor set just looks really cool, and these enemies just look cool, and honestly, it's just a blast fighting them. And coming in the 9th spot is going to be the Old Knights from Hades Tower Flame. And low-key, I think these guys are pretty underrated. Firstly, there's 3 different variants of it. One with a giant, just long sword, one with a regular short sword, and one with a hammer-like weapon. And this does add diversity in the way they look, but it also just makes the combat flow so much differently. Each different variant of these guys, you have to play with a totally different style, which I obviously like. Also, these guys are pretty unique in the sense that they're only in Hades Tower Flame. There's kind of a version of them at the very end of the game, but they're not really the same enemy. I also like how they kind of an honor system. There's the main knight with the giant sword in the middle, and none of them will fight you till they see that you've killed that main guy, which obviously I think is pretty cool. And these knights obviously look cool, they're super fun to fight, and that's really about it for them. And coming right after that is actually going to be another Dark Souls 2 enemy, which I think is the last Dark Souls 2 enemy on this list. Also, this isn't my gameplay because I did not feel like fighting every enemy and recording it, so I low-key just got these off of YouTube, which means they might not accurately depict how I'm describing these enemies. Sometimes the gameplay here can look pretty boring when I'm describing the enemy. I keep saying boss fight by accident, but when I'm describing the enemy is super cool, the gameplay might not reflect that, and also I just might be showing something totally different, because not every enemy has a dedicated video made to them. And I'm sure there is videos for the 8th spot, but I really could not find any, so it's just going to be this video here of this guy searching for invisible hollows. In the 8th spot is going to be the Rupturing hollows, which are most likely found in Lost Bastille, but they could also be found as a different variant later in the game, like Dragon Area or whatever it is. And although these guys scare the shit out of me and they definitely make me rage quit, it adds so much more online. Like, it makes me have so much more emotions while playing the game. It makes me so much more locked in and so much more invested when playing this game, which is obviously a good thing overall. Like, you might not notice it in the moment, but that is what makes you come back to games and keep playing them, which I really like about this enemy. He always has you on the tip of your toes, because obviously it's kind of like a jump scare. It's a super scary fucking zombie that will explode into a shit ton of damage and just scare the shit out of you. They're also super fast and super unpredictable. Some of them seem friendly, some of them seem like they're not going to do anything, and they just fucking lunge at you. Now, they are pretty easy to kill. They're like one shot or two shot, but they are like a glass cannon. So if you miss them, you're kind of fucked. The ones later in the game, I think, aren't as good because they kind of just rely on breaking your armor, which is more of just a pain than like having, like, you're not going to be scared you're going to die, but you're going to be like, I have to repair my armor. So that kind of brings it down a bit. I think if it wasn't for that, it would probably be like the 5th or 4th spot. And since I ran out of gameplay, you unfortunately got a little sneak peek and spoiler of what the next enemy was going to be. And I think we're either in 7th or 6th place, but that is going to be the giant knights at Anor Londo. Specifically the ones guarding Ornstein's Smoke, which I'm pretty sure there are only like 2 of those type, but also the giant knights at Anor Londo as a whole. And there's a lot I could say about this boss, but firstly, the basic, the obvious. Look how fucking cool this guy is. This is like a 20-foot giant with golden armor, a huge shield, and a pretty fucking cool weapon. Secondly, these guys are low-key just chill. They just kind of stand there till you initiate contact first, but you know, who doesn't love that? And their movesets are definitely pretty fun to fight, you know, swapping between their legs, running around them. That is all pretty fun, but the main difficulty and the coolest aspect of their moveset is in the 2 main ones that guard Ornstein's Smoke. Firstly, they can heal if you're being too passive, which I think a lot of people do for these type of enemies. Secondly, they can like use the Force or the Wrath of the Gods, whatever you want to call it. And I just think that it's super cool, and I don't know, I just fucking love these guys, man. Now for the next spot, I'm going to be using Dark Souls Remastered gameplay, but this can occur and these enemies are in Dark Souls 1, 2, and 3. And that is going to be the Mimics, which obviously I think you guys would know that could never be the number 1 spot, but it's just such a unique, like, it's such a unique thing to the Soul series and just games as a whole that you have to include it somewhere on this list. And that is basically a giant just chest that you think is going to have loot in it, but when you open it, a fucking monster with a long-ass freaky tongue appears and starts munching on you. Now, even if we don't include how unique this fucking and even if we don't include how unique this enemy is, like how fucking cool it looks, how fucking crazy this is, it is still a fun enemy to fight. Like, it is very unpredictable. It does a shit ton of damage, and it like knows fucking Taekwondo, which I think is pretty crazy and pretty cool. And this enemy brings so much more life to the game. Like, in spots where you think you're safe, and there's a chest, like, you never know, like, an enemy could come out and just fucking kill you. And having an aspect like this definitely makes you more involved in the game and definitely a lot more on the tip of your toes. And coming in the 5th spot is going to be the Ringed Knights from the Dark Souls 3 last DLC. And honestly, just look at these fuckers. Look how cool they look. And let me tell you, that is just the beginning of how fucking awesome they are. Firstly, as I said before, they look absolutely crazy, unlike any other enemy in Dark Souls 3. Secondly, they have varying knights, and what I mean by that, just like the old knights from Dark Souls 2, some of them have different weapons, which just cause for a totally different type of playset for each of them. Like, you have to fight each of these guys super differently, which is obviously super unique, and it's super fun coming in with different counters to these enemies. Secondly, they are a relatively common enemy from the era that they are in, but it's not to the point where it gets overwhelming or just flat out repetitive and boring. And I think definitely a part of that is how unique and fun these guys are to fight. Did I mention how unique and fun these guys are to fight? And since I think I went over all the main points that I have for this guy, I don't want to make the video too long, so we'll just go right along to the next one. And following that is going to be the Old Hunters from the Bloodborne DLC. And quite frankly, I couldn't think of a better entrance or enemy to fight at the start of the DLC. Firstly, these enemies are super memorable, and they're just flat out fun to fight. Now, these are one of the enemies that definitely bring a lot more life to the world, and what I mean by that is, when you progress through the game, just in almost every Souls game, the enemies are kind of just walking in circles, minding their own business, but this guy brings a lot of life because he's fighting the enemies with you, just like how Abyss Watcher does. He's like killing these enemies right in front of you, so in that sense, you guys both kind of have a common goal, but then, you know, obviously he turns around and starts fucking you up. They also showcase the new weapons of the DLC very well, and there's tons of different ones to fight, which obviously, you know, are the varying new DLC weapons, and you have to have a different playstyle to fight each of them, and I honestly just think they don't overly spam their attacks, but they are definitely threatening enough to make you be patient and make you be cautious. And these guys are honestly enemies that just give you a nice and clean fight. It's just super satisfying and super fun to fight them. It's also super cool to watch them slaughter all the other weak enemies in this game, so that's why it's the number 4th spot. I think it's very deserving, and now we're making it to the big 3. And I do spend quite a bit of time on these Johns, definitely a lot more time on these Johns that I'm putting up on the screen right now. So if any of these interest you, please check them out. I think some of them will. Just give me a shot, please. I won't disappoint, hopefully. And starting off the top 3 is going to be our last enemy from Sekiro, which are the Interior Ministry Ninjas. Now these guys are definitely very unique and creative in terms of combat. Not only do they have those random sword attacks, I mean just varying sword attacks like almost every enemy does, but these guys have like fucking kick attacks where they jump in the air, they fucking slam their foot down, they do these spinning whirlwind fucking kicks, which obviously are super cool, super unique, and just in general their combat is very fun and probably one of the most satisfying things to fight in the game. And Sekiro is a very satisfying game, so that is saying something. And they're just fun to fight, right amount of health, they're not too aggressive, they don't have too much damage, everything is spot on with these guys. And the second spot is going to be the Black Knights from Dark Souls Remastered. And I just low-key think the way they design these guys for progression throughout the game is fabulous. Now I am saying low-key a lot, but just low-key. These guys are with you at the beginning of the game. You will find 3 or 4 of them in the Undead Burge, and they're just super cool but super scary. These guys will probably one-shot you, they have a shit ton of health, and you're most likely not going to beat them. But that doesn't matter. If you fight them a couple times and get their moveset, these are one of the enemies that you can very much master. The combat flows practically flawlessly. The parries are on par, the backstabs are on par. They're all super great timing. The way they just attack is super cool. It's super fun to fight them. But back to the progressing stage. They're obviously super hard when you fight them in the beginning of the area, or just beginning of the game. They're probably going to one-shot you, yada yada. They do have really good rewards, so it's a risk-reward thing. But the main thing I love is the rareness of these guys. You're only going to find 4 in the early game, and then 1 or 2 mid to late game, and then there's a shit ton in the final area. Which kind of the whole entire point of fighting them early game was to prepare you for this. So once you've been shit on by these guys and how I used to be super scared of them, they're now just a regular enemy in this area, which I think is just super cool. And really, just look at them, they are super badass. Now it is finally time for the number 1 spot, and that is the enemy in Elden Ring. I'm going to give you a second to guess, just ponder, what do you think this could possibly be? Also, make sure to like and subscribe, and the enemy is going to be the Crucible Knights. And who doesn't love these bad boys? There are just so many good things that these guys do. They ace almost every single thing on the test. They're taking about 20 classes, and 19 of them they got an A+ on. Firstly, just look at the boss. It is super cool. I mean, look at it. It's a glory to look at it. They're just badass. They're cool. They're hard, but they're not too hard, and they are fair. They're definitely a fair fight. And I died on these guys probably 40-ish times throughout my Elden Ring playthrough, which is a lot. But there is a lot of them, so it's not that crazy, but still. I was never mad when I died. In fact, I was probably happy that I died because I got to fight these guys again. And to add on top of that, the uniqueness, I guess, or not uniqueness, but the replayability of these guys, because it's not just one guy. Even though he has fucking crazy moves, I think if you add that 20 times, it would get pretty boring. There's 3 or 4 variants in terms of weapons, but there's also variants in terms of skills. Some do nature skills where they use fucking plant attacks and shit like that, and some just use fucking bull horns and shit like that, which is super cool. And you're definitely gonna run into several of them, not at the same time, but just several in general that probably have a very similar, if not the exact same moveset. But it doesn't matter, because if you're just looking at this gameplay right now, the moveset is a spectacle. It is so cool watching this, and there's just so many different attacks. These guys probably have fucking 30 attacks to the point it doesn't really get boring. And that's about all I have to say. I was about to plug you guys liking and subscribing, but I think I did that 5 times already. So yeah, thank you for watching, and see you in the next one.